Okay, so good evening, everyone. I am Dr. Gagandeep Kaur, the moderator for the day. So I welcome you all to Global Outreach Dental Webinars 2020. Since we had a huge line of beautiful speakers with us discussing about the dental topics as well as the conditions right now going on. But today we are moving ahead, or I must say deviated from the topic, especially in cases like we have been discussing about the dental topics and issues, but today we'll be discussing about much of death. So I hope death, when people hear about the word, becomes quite scary, or people are actually afraid to accept the word or accept the reality that yes, we are having the cycle of birth as well as death. We have come to earth, we have to go back, we have to face death. This is actually a reality, but yes, people are having a fear in today's world, there in the mind, in some corner, that yes, this is a difficult thing to accept. So today I would like to welcome Mr. Kelvin with us, who will be discussing about life after reincarnation, or discussing about how to overcome the fears of death. So I would like to welcome Mr. Kelvin with us, and I would like to speak a few words about him. And I would like to introduce that Mr. Kelvin, he actually founded Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation, Turning Within Meditation Foundation, and kelvinchin.org. He is the executive director and founder of these foundations. He founded these non-profits in 2015 to focus his 40 years of experience in spiritual self-development, meditation, and corporate business towards helping people worldwide with insights, knowledge, and practical tools to live happier, more productive, and enjoyable lives. Through his non-profit, Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation, he has dedicated his efforts to helping people improve their quality of life through an approach that is based on understanding death more clearly and aligning that understanding more accurately with each of our respective belief systems, whatever they may be. By doing so, each person reduces or eliminates their fear of death to free up otherwise wasted energy that can be refocused to better use in one's daily life. He's also the author of a 2016 bestseller book, Overcoming the Fear of Death, through each of the 4 main belief systems. He's a frequent sought-after speaker at conferences, healthcare institutions, webinars, and podcasts to increase understanding about death and dying in order to both help audience overcome the fear of death and to understand better other people's life about death and dying. In addition, Kelvin helps people develop a more balanced, productive, and enjoyable life, mentally, physically, emotionally, by teaching people worldwide turning within meditation via Skype, phone, and in person. So I would like to welcome Mr. Kelvin with us. So with this, the stage is all yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's great to be here with everybody. And I know I'm speaking mostly to dentists today and doctors of various kinds. So I should probably just say a few words about myself in terms of my background. I come from a math, science, and language background, actually from an educational standpoint. I also went to law school. But I come from a perspective, if you will, about thinking about things, whether we talk about just, math, science, or languages, or life in general, from a rational standpoint. So I think about things as rationally as possible, as logically as possible, even when it comes to things like meditation and afterlife and reincarnation experiences that we're going to be talking about today together. So what happened for me in terms of the topic that we're discussing today is that I learned to meditate when I was a teenager. So I was at college. I was at a very high pressure university in the United States, Dartmouth College. and I was very stressed. I was very anxious, very stressed out college student, like many college students are, and a lot of anxiety. And so I learned to meditate then, and it really helped reduce my stress and my anxiety. That's really the purpose that I was seeking. That was my objective of learning meditation. It was not to seek out spiritual things. I was really not a very spiritually oriented person, at least not consciously at the time. But spontaneously, what started happening after several years of meditating in the mid 1970s, I opened up and started having reincarnation memories. And then in the mid 1980s, many years ago now, I started having communications with people who were dead, who were on the other side. You know, you may call it heaven, you may call it nirvana, you may call it Valhalla. Different cultures call it different things. You know, I work with people from across 41 different countries now. So I'm very, very aware of, conscious of the different languages that people use in terms of talking about this kind of afterlife area. So I try to use language that's as neutral as possible. So you'll hear me say, call it afterlife instead of heaven and so forth. So, but it's all the same. But so I started communicating with people in the afterlife. Obviously, I was here on this side in the mid 1980s, and all of these experiences have continued for me up to the present. I still teach meditation. I've been teaching meditation, as you heard, for 47 years now, worldwide, thousands of people. Very easy, effortless technique. Quick comment in terms of the world we live in today and the context in which we can think about this topic, which is not your usual dentistry medical topic today on your webinars. We're living in a world which is very much affected on many levels, both a mental, emotional, and a physical level by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's the elephant in the room, if you will. It's that topic out there that everybody has in the back of their mind, whether they're talking about it verbally or not. We've all been touched by it in various ways. If we haven't had loved ones who've gotten sick and died, then we have probably known somebody who has been touched by it and at least gotten very ill from it, or had some symptoms of some sort related to COVID-19. And at the very, very least, we are all worldwide have been sequestered in our homes for various lengths of time. So it's very much in everybody's consciousness. And as a result, the fear associated with it, the anxiety associated with it is very, very high. And many, many people have been contacting me from around the world for me to help them with my various workshops and classes and so forth, and private phone sessions that I do with people. But even before the COVID-19 epidemic started, several months ago, fear and anxiety about death and dying has existed forever. And I think a big part of that is about the unknown. It's about the uncertainty, the fear of uncertainty and the unknown about what is going to happen to us after we each physically die. And I want to talk with you about some of my experiences today and share them with you. And perhaps it might give you some what I call data points to help relieve or ease up some of your fears about this. Even if you have not had the exact or similar experiences that I have had, perhaps it might open your awareness up to other possibilities in terms of how you're thinking about death and dying, and what may happen to us after we die. As I said earlier, I'm a very rational, logically thinking kind of person. So the objective in all of my work, whether it's about teaching meditation or helping people with death and dying fears, or teaching classes about afterlife and reincarnation, is my objective is always the same. My objective is to teach as clearly as possible and help my students understand as much as possible so that we can demystify the mystical. I don't think that these things that are very often talked about either in religious or cultural terms as being very mystical and far out there kind of experiences need to be thought about that way. And as you heard, in terms of my experiences, I've had them for so long that it's become a very normal, natural part of how I experience life. And I think that can be the case for all of us. That's my message. So let's start out and talk about the afterlife. We'll talk about this discussion today in two different segments. We'll talk about the afterlife first, what happens after we physically die, what my experiences have been, and not just my experiences, but my experiences in talking to other friends and family and other close people I know, and what their experiences have been that reinforce the thinking in terms of the afterlife, what we're going to talk about. And then the second part, we'll talk about reincarnation. And then I understand we're going to have a Q&A, a question and answer period at the end. So I'll try to leave plenty of time for you to ask questions. So feel free to write down questions and ask them at the end of the session today. So as I said, I am all about demystifying the mystical, making this as normal and natural a process, understanding it as possible, and reducing people's fear as a result as much as I can. Why? So that we can live life in the present. Because whether we believe in an afterlife or don't believe in an afterlife, whether we believe in reincarnation or don't believe in reincarnation in past lives, it doesn't matter. To me, it's all about, my work is all about helping people live more in the present, because that's where we are now. More in the present, more productively, and live a happier life. But let's talk about the afterlife. 4 things I want to say right off the bat about the afterlife. 4 general principles, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about all of them in this section of our discussion today. First is that there's less difference between here and there than most people realize. Point number 1. Point number 2, the there is not far away. Point number 3, yes, there's no dense physical body or biological body on the other side or in the afterlife. Number 4, our mind continues after our physical body dies. And when I say mind, you could substitute other words that are synonymous with the word mind. You could substitute soul, consciousness, awareness, spirit. People use different words in different cultures. And as I said, I teach across so many different cultures in the world. I try to use words that are very neutral words. So when I talk about mind, I'm talking about my conscious mind that's speaking to you right now, that's deciding which words I'm going to say at which time. Our conscious mind that decides, when you're walking down the stairs at your house or at your apartment building, you have to focus, you have to pay attention and make sure you're putting one foot in front of the other properly so you don't fall. So that's our conscious focusing part of our mind. That's part of our mind. But there's this larger part of our mind that's included in addition to that focusing part of our mind. So when I talk about mind, I'm talking about our conscious mind, our focusing part of our mind, and I'm talking about that larger part of our mind. It's a continuum. It's all of our mind. But when you hear me use the word mind, you could substitute the word soul, spirit, consciousness, awareness, same thing. Okay? So let's first talk about the first law of thermodynamics. What's the first law of thermodynamics in physics? The first law of thermodynamics tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed. So it's the conservation of matter, conservation of energy idea. So what does that mean? That means that, well, I'll show you my book. I'll use my book as an example. This is a picture of my book, Overcoming the Fear of Death. It's available on Amazon and all online sellers. But let's just say I took my book as an example and I burnt the book, okay? I burnt the book in a fire. What would happen? Based on the first law of thermodynamics that we're talking about, the conservation of energy, what would happen? This book that is a physical book, has pages in it and so forth, would no longer be a physical book in the way that we're looking at it, would it? It would turn into ashes, and it would also give off gas. So the first law of thermodynamics tells us if we collected all of that energy that was this book, right, a few minutes earlier, now it's ashes and gas. If we collect all of that matter and energy, the ashes and the gas and everything else that was this book, energy would be retained. We would still be able to account for everything that was this book. First law of thermodynamics. Now, what happens, however, to the book is that it changes form, doesn't it? So the book changes form. It's no longer a physical book anymore. It is ashes and gas, but it retains its energy. So I think that's exactly what happens to us. That's been my experience. My experiences include being on the other side and not just communicating with people on the other side, but I have experiences being on the other side as well. Our energy continues. Now, this just takes on a different form. The energy that's Kelvin Chin that you see talking and has physical body, wearing a sweater and a shirt and so forth, changes at some point. I will die. I will no longer have a physical biological body that's functioning, but my mind will continue. My consciousness will continue. So I view myself, therefore, as energy. And I think even from a physical standpoint, we can view ourselves as energy, as atoms and molecules and so forth. I think science tells us that we are atoms and molecules making up this body, vibrating at a certain frequency and so forth and so on, with chemicals and biochemistry and brain chemistry and all of that going on. My experience is that even though that drops away and stops, my mind consciousness continues. Therefore, my energy continues. Do we have a physical body after we die? Let's talk about this. This idea of losing our physical biological body, yes. Our biological body dies at death, what we call death here on planet Earth, right? But something continues. Our energy continues, our consciousness, our mind, our personality continues, it seems. That's been my experience. And that we have an identifiable energy pattern that also continues. What do I mean by that? That means that on the other side, we'll call it the other side or the afterlife, on the other side, I can still identify people who I may recognize from this side. On the other side, I can still recognize them. I recognize their energy. When I've had visits from people on the other side who visited me on this side, I can recognize who they are. They can show me their face. Like if Rakesh came and showed me his face, because I've seen his face, even though we haven't met face to face in person on planet Earth, I've seen his face. If, let's say, Rakesh and I are both dead, biologically dead, but we are still, quote unquote, alive on the other side because our mind is continuing, he could show me an energy vibration or an energy form of his face, and I go, oh, Rakesh, it's you. Now I see you. Now I recognize you again. Okay, great. he shows me his physical energy vibration of his face. So I have had that experience. I've seen this before. I've seen it on this side as Kelvin Chin, somebody on the other side coming in to visit me, showing me their face. I've had this experience many times. Now, back to this example of Rakesh and I on the other side, let's say. He shows me his face. I recognize him. He doesn't have to show me his face anymore, even in an energy form, for me to recognize that when his energy form comes to talk with me on the other side, I notice, oh, Rakesh, that's you again. Rakesh, okay, it's you. So same thing, if he visited me on this side, if he predeceased me and died before me, for example, and visited me on this side, I have had that exact same experience with people I know. I knew in this lifetime, 20th century, 21st century Earth, I knew them. They died, they go on the other side, and I've had that exact experience where they come and visit me on this side, show me their face first in this energy form, I recognize them, and then after that, I just recognize their energy. That's why I call it an identifiable energy pattern, is what we seem to have when we are on the other side. So if you are a physicist, if you are a scientist who is an expert in physics, you might argue with me and say, wait a minute, people always say when they die, they don't have, they go to the other side, to the afterlife, heaven, whatever you want to call it, and they don't have a body anymore. And the physicists might say, no, if you have an identifiable energy pattern, you still have a body. It's an energy body. It's not a biological body, not a physical biological body that needs to be fed and clothed and housed and so forth, protected from the elements. But it's still a body. It's an energy body. I would agree with the physicist who said that. So in that sense, that's why I came up with the term identifiable energy pattern. It's identifiable. We recognize who we are on the other side still, and yet it's energy form that's identifiable. So we could call it an energy body if we want to be technical about it. Another point about the other side in afterlife is a lot of times you'll hear people talk about this idea of merging after you die, merging with the oneness, merging with God, if you believe in God. As I said, I work across cultures and religions, so I work with people who don't believe in God, who are atheists or agnostics, and I work with people who are very religious and believe in God. I work with Muslims, Hindus, Christians, Sikhs, Jews. Who am I leaving out? I've worked with all of the various religions across the world. So I'm just using examples. So some people may say they merge when they die. They believe that they merge with the oneness or God or the absolute, or merge with some experience like this, or some area or some field. People will call it a field of all possibilities or something, that they merge with that. And my experience is that that's not the case, is that we retain our individuality when we die. And I think this idea of merging that has come about, and it's become very popular to talk about in terms of in a non-religious way. So very, very, very popular in spiritual circles, in spiritual communities around the world. People talking about this idea of oneness, and using a quasi kind of scientific reliance on quantum mechanics out of physics. And quantum mechanics is a theory that's a part of physics. It's a subsection of the field of physics, the science of physics. But quantum mechanics is a theory. It's a probability theory. It's really meant to be a mathematical probability theory. If you talk to quantum mechanics experts, that was the intention of quantum mechanics, and that's how quantum mechanics is used in physics. Other people have taken that mathematical probability theory and used it to support some some extrapolated theoretical idea of oneness, which is not what quantum mechanics was meant to do. So this is a point of conflation and confusion amongst many people in the spiritual community, because they hear somebody who has a science degree talking about using that quantum mechanics theory, but they're not quantum mechanics physicist experts using that. So if you really want to understand quantum mechanics more thoroughly, I'm not a quantum mechanics expert, and we're not here to talk about quantum mechanics, but if you hear that theory, I suggest that you seek out an expert in quantum mechanics and ask them what their opinion is about using quantum mechanics theory in terms of supporting this idea of oneness. But back to my experience is that we retain our individuality on the other side. What does that mean? If we retain our individuality, if I see Rakesh on the other side and I recognize his energy, we are obviously retaining our individuality on some level. We have an identifiable energy pattern that's recognizable. Therefore, by definition, logically, rationally, that means we did not merge with any field of absolute or oneness. We did not merge with anything. Merging means you lose your individuality. That's what it means rationally. So when you hear people talk about using the term merging, it literally means you lose your individuality. Therefore, all of those people who some of you may know people who've had near-death experiences. Near-death experiences when they die near death, could be on a surgery table in a hospital. Many times that happens. Or it could be in an accident or car accident or who knows what. But people will, I had a near-death experience where I almost drowned. But people will have a glimpse of the other side and then come back and say, oh, I met Allah or Jesus or God or an angel or my dead grandmother or so on the other side. Well, if they're having that experience of meeting somebody, obviously that is an experience of individuality existing. It's not an experience of merging. Merging means no experience. That's what it means definitionally. So if you hear people use the word merging and they're still talking about having experience on the other side, they're conflating and confusing. They're not speaking rationally or logically, or they're not understanding it properly, okay? Where does this idea, so just a quick aside, where does the idea of oneness come from? I think it legitimately comes from a genuine experience that I have had thousands of times, that many of you may have had if you've ever meditated, or whether you're a meditator or not. You could be sitting on a hillside, spacing out, looking up at the sky and watching the clouds go by and have this experience. You maybe have this experience watching sunrise in that quiet moment, is nobody around at the beach and you're watching the sunrise in the distance over the ocean. People can have this experience at different times, is my point, not just during meditation. But the experience that I'm going to describe is I think, where this idea of oneness comes from. In the experience, which is a very genuine experience, and it's a pretty common experience, not uncommon, where you feel very, very connected with all living things and maybe all animate and inanimate things as well. You just feel so connected and expanded in meditation, or whether you're lying on the hill, spacing out, looking up at the clouds going by, you might have this expansion experience where you feel so huge and expanded. It's your mind, it's your consciousness experiencing itself in a very, very different way than that usual little focusing conscious part of our mind. I call that the 8-inch plastic bucket part of our mind. Our mind is not limited to this little 8-inch plastic bucket. Our mind is huge. But most people only experience the little 8-inch plastic bucket part of their mind, their conscious, focusing, thinking part of the mind. Most people think their mind is their thoughts. Our mind is not our thoughts. Thoughts are part of what we can experience as an experiencer of life, But experience is not just limited to our thoughts and our emotions. We can experience the vastness of the universe with our mind. That's getting way outside the 8-inch plastic bucket. When you go to the other side, you experience this incredible connection also. So people will go and have an NDE, a near-death experience, and come back and say, I experienced this oneness on the other side. I was so connected. Yes, but you did not merge. You feel connected. It's not the same as oneness. So it's a little bit of confusion in terms. I understand where it comes from, but just as we're thinking through this, my audience here being more of a science audience, thinking about it from a rational, logical standpoint, you can see where the confusion may arise there, but you can see where it's not exactly merging with oneness because you're retaining your individuality. You still have experience. Here's another point about the afterlife. Do time and space still exist after we physically, biologically die? My experience is that yes, time and space still exist on the other side. Very often you'll hear people talking on YouTube videos or in lectures and workshops and books, or maybe they've had a near-death experience and they come back and they're on one of the social media platforms talking about how there's no time and space on the other side. That is also a conflation and confusion. And it's understandable why the people will say that, but I want to point out to you that it is a conflation and confusion. Why do I point these things out? Because first of all, I think it's important for us to think about things logically and rationally in life. I think it's very important. And I don't think that any of these experiences and about afterlife and reincarnation and so forth are outside of that realm. I think they are fully within the realm of thinking about them rationally and logically. They may be outside the realm of many people's experience, I'll give you that, but for those of us who've had the experiences, I think it's incumbent upon us to help those who have not had these experiences to think about them in a rational, logical way, because these are not far out experiences. These can be a normal experience for anyone. So back to this time and space issue. Time and space still exist on the other side. Why? Because time is what? Time is a measurement of change. That's what time is. Time is not a subjective experience. Time is a measurement of change. So right there, if people are defining time as a subjective experience, then right there is a point of confusion, and right there they will depart and go off in a tangent and make comments about there being no time on the other side. Okay? So it's kind of like this. You see my hands. It's like the upside down triangle here. Down here at the base of, at the point of the triangle down there, if you start to define things incorrectly or think about things incorrectly, then what does that do? That starts to change your belief system. It starts to change your thinking. It starts to change your emotions, and that changes your behavior. That can create a lot of fear if you start misunderstanding things and defining things incorrectly. So time is a measurement of change. What have we already said? On the other side, individuality seems to continue to exist. If individuality seems to continue to exist after we physically die, and we don't merge with God or the oneness or spirit or the universe or whatever you want to say, we don't merge with some absolute field, then individuality is continuing, then time still exists, because time is a measurement of change. Because if individuality is continuing, then we still have change going on. I see Rakesh on the other side, and he goes off and he does something and he comes back. Clearly there's change going on there. He wasn't here. He didn't merge with something. If there's individuality, there is change, okay? So time still exists, but the experience of time is very different. That's the thing. So that's where the genuine confusion and conflation arises from, because the experience of time on the other side is not like the experience of time on planet Earth. My experience is that Well, first of all, think about it. We are energy on the other side. We don't have a biological body. We don't have to get in a car. We don't have to get in an airplane. We don't have to get on a bicycle. We don't have to walk anywhere. You're energy. You're a mental energy on the other side. No biological body. So, okay, energy body, energy form. But you can get around so much quicker. And so when I was thinking about this, and because as you guys know, I teach classes on this. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, what can I give my students as an example on this side that gives them a sense of how time and space are different on the other side, but still exist? And I thought, well, what can we measure that's energetic on this side? Light. We know the speed of light. We can measure the speed of light. What's the speed of light? I looked it up. The speed of light on planet Earth is 670,616,629 miles per hour. Round that off, 670,616,629 miles per hour. Round that off, 700 million miles per hour. That's how fast the speed of light is in our physical universe on planet Earth, okay? 700 million miles per hour. How fast is that? Just to give you a sense. That means you can get around the Earth at the equator, the fattest part of the Earth, 24,000 miles around the Earth. You can get around the Earth in 1/8 of a second. 1/8 of a second, that's pretty fast. Last I checked, that's pretty fast. 8 times around the Earth in 1 second at the speed of light. So let's just say, I don't know how fast we can travel on the other side. I just know we can travel really fast. But let's say it's the speed of light, 700 million miles per hour on the other side. Very different experience of time and space. So you can genuinely see how somebody may come back from the other side of having had a near-death experience and tell everybody there's no time and space on the other side. You can be in 2 places at once. You just, no. The experience of time and place is very different on the other side, but there's still individuality. Time is a measurement of change. Therefore, individuality still exists. Therefore, there still is change on the other side. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had experience to come back and talk about by definition. So if we think about this rationally, it makes no sense when people say there's no time and space on the other side. It makes sense to say time and space on the other side is experienced completely differently from this side on planet Earth. Or maybe not completely differently, but so differently that it seems like it's completely differently. That would be an accurate statement rationally to make if you were rationally describing your experience having come back from an NDE on the other side. All right, so time and space still exists. What about tunnels of light? People talk about tunnels of light. And that can happen to some people. Some people don't have the experience. All right, and I think the tunnel of light experience, quite frankly, can easily rationally be experienced, explained by the lack of experience of people's that have on planet Earth with the fact that their mind is light. But those of you who meditate experience your mind as light. The longer, the more years you meditate, the more you experience the fact that your mind is a light form. Your mind is a light form. It's experience of light. And therefore, when you go to the other side, the brightness of the energy, which is just energy, is not so shocking to you. But when you go over there and you have not had experience of your mind as light, very often on this side, you feel like you're going through a tunnel when you go through the other side because it feels dark and then all of a sudden really, really bright. I think that's an explanation rationally for why some people experience the tunnel of light and why some people don't. Are we greeted by old friends when we die? Absolutely, yes. And I want to say this to all of you who have loved ones who may be in hospitals with COVID-19 and you're worried about them dying alone. Nobody dies alone. Nobody dies alone. We are greeted by old friends, old loved ones, and so forth. If we're very spiritually or religiously oriented, we may be greeted by some of those spiritual and religious leaders from that culture that we may come from. They greet us on the other side. Lots of friends and loved ones will greet us. Why? Because they help us acclimate, because it's so different from planet Earth on the other side. So nobody ever dies alone. So I just want to end this section of the discussion today on afterlife just by saying that what happens on the other side? We are there to relax and rejuvenate. It's like vacation on the other side. We can be wherever we want to be. We can do whatever we want to do. There's no punishment on the other side. There's no karmic reconciliation. There's no accounting system and so forth. I give a whole other separate discussion about punishment and karma and dharma and sin and so forth. But there's no punishment. There's no rewards and punishment that anybody is giving out on the other side. Okay? It's a time to relax and rejuvenate and refresh ourselves. And we can stay over there for as long as we want. And then I'll just segue to my next topic here, talk about reincarnation for a few minutes before we open up to questions. We can stay on the other side as long as we want, or we can choose to come back. And I've had, starting in 1977 is when I first had my first reincarnation memories. And I didn't even know there were reincarnation memories at first. To be honest, I told you guys, I started out in a math science. I was pre-med initially when I was at Dartmouth. So I was a math science guy. So that was my background. That was my intention. I intended to be a doctor. That was my intention when I was 18 years old. I learned to meditate, and I started having reincarnation memories in 1977, about 7 years after I learned to meditate. I didn't even know what they were. I used to think reincarnation was, I knew what it was, but I just kind of thought it was a joke. I didn't really take it seriously, quite frankly. I was very skeptical. I was very science-oriented at the time. And I'm still very rational and logical, as you can tell. But what happened even earlier than that, 1977, I realized, looking back and thinking about it, is that what happened with me and what may happen with some of you, and I'm using this as a teaching point for you, how many of you have ever had a deja vu experience? You know, that term deja vu? It's like you've been there before, or it's like you're sitting with somebody and you're talking with them. You say, I feel like we had this conversation already. You know, we've all had experiences like that. There are even more intense experiences of deja vu where you feel like you've been someplace, like you've been there before. You fly into a city you've never been to before, and you feel like, no, I've been here. For some reason, I just know I've been here before. A deja vu experience, you know, so that's what I call recognition memories. And I had started having that kind of experience when I was 5 years old. My mom took me, and I'm just looking back in retrospect, realizing that I had these recognition memories. And I'll connect the dots for you in a second. But my mom, when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, used to take me to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, Massachusetts, where I was born. And she used to take me, think about this, 5, 6-year-old little boy I was, in the lobby of the museum when it opened at Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. And my mom said, Kelvin, look at Mickey Mouse. I had a Mickey Mouse watch. And my mom said, Kelvin, look at your watch. When Mickey's little hand is on the 11 and his big arm is on the 12, I'll meet you back here in the lobby. 2 hours. I'd roam around, I'd walk around the museum, this huge museum, by myself, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. We used to go in there regularly. And my mom would go off and look at paintings, I don't know what. I would go to 2 areas. I went to the Egyptian mummies, and the medieval armor from the Middle Ages. That's where I'd go. And I'd hang out there for hours alone. But this is back in the late 1950s. There was nobody there. The museums were not popular places to go to back then. Okay, it's those of you who are younger, think, oh, museums full of people. Not back then. Very few people would go to museums, and so. Plus, it was Saturday morning at 9 o'clock. Who's showing up in a museum then? Everybody's sleeping in. So I'm walking around, Egyptian mummies, medieval armor. Fast forward, much later, I had an experience similar when I was 20 years old in college, and I went to Europe to study in a foreign study program. And we went to the catacombs outside Rome. And we went down into the catacombs. We did a tour. I was there with a couple of college buddies of mine. We were studying together. And we walked out of the catacomb tour. I had no idea how much time had passed. I felt I'd been in a time warp. You had that experience before? You go someplace and you just have no idea. Like, was I there for 5 minutes? Was I down in the catacombs for 5 minutes? Was I there for an hour and 5 minutes? I had no idea. By the way, catacombs, if you don't know, those are these tunnels and rooms underneath the earth where they used to bury the dead in the first centuries, and before the first century. So many, many thousands of years ago. And so they would bury people under the ground in the walls and so forth, and there would be little rooms to do religious ceremonies and so forth. The early Christians used to go down there and worship and sometimes hide if they were being persecuted and so forth. The Etruscans built this before the Romans started using them and so forth for their dead, etc. Well, I went down there. I came out. I felt I was in a time warp, and the other thing was I knew I'd been there before. So again, I came up with this term recognition memories, just like the museum experience when I was 5, 6 years old, 20 years old, another recognition memory. So much later than that, I started having past life memories, being an Egyptian priest, being a crusader. I'll tell you about that experience in a second. Being an African slave in the Carthaginian Roman Wars, in the Punic Wars. I was a slave. I was African. I was enslaved by the Carthaginians around 2,300 years ago, about 330 BC, on a warship, and I almost died. That's the story. I have that story in my book about almost dying. The Carthage memory, it's called in the book. Those of you some of you may have bought my book already. The Carthage memory is what is in there, and I won't give you the whole details about that. I'll tell you more about the Crusader memory in a second. But the Carthage memory, just quick, I was almost dying on a piece of wreckage. That was the first memory that I had of that lifetime. I've had my memories go back about 6,000 years, and I have memories from about 23 to 25 different lifetimes. And that memory, I almost died. The first memory of that lifetime I had was I was on a piece of wreckage almost dying. I didn't know where I was. I was on this vast body of water. I thought it was the ocean. Later, I got more memories, and I got pictures in my mind of the ship that I was on that had been blown up. So then I went and I followed the breadcrumbs. What do I mean by that? Follow the breadcrumbs is a tip that I give my students if they start opening up these memories. I started looking things up, and I started looking, okay, what kind of ship is that? This ship that I'm seeing that I think I was in. And it was these ancient ships, because I didn't know. I just knew that I was dying on a piece of wreckage at the first memory that I had. Then I started looking up the ships. I saw the ship. I started having more emotional feelings. So very often these memories would come not just visually and not just a memory like that, but sometimes emotionally. and other senses as well, which I'll get into in a second. But that memory taught me what? That taught me to survive through my willpower, my mental will to stay alive. And I've used that today in this lifetime when I've gotten laid off, I've gotten furloughed, and then sometimes laid off in jobs 5 times since I was 50 years old in this lifetime. A company gets bought, they throw out all the senior executives, they don't need me anymore, you know, because we get bought by a company that's 10 times bigger than we were, or 5 times, or 3 times bigger, you know. Some of you have been there. You know what I'm talking about. You know what that's like. I had to reinvent myself. I've used that memory of the strength of my mind from 2,300 years ago to stay alive, the willpower to stay alive. I've used that willpower to stay alive financially and career-wise and so forth in this lifetime. My Crusader memory was an interesting memory. This one happened when I was just lying down, resting after I meditated. So those of you who meditate, I suggest that you always lie down and rest, or sit there and rest for a few minutes. I tell my meditation students for 5 to 10 minutes, resting afterwards at least, or longer if you want, because you don't want to cancel out the benefits of your meditation. So those of you who've taken meditation classes from other meditation teachers and they didn't tell you that, take it from me. Add that to your practice. You will find your benefits of your meditation will skyrocket, okay? I'm lying there resting after my meditation, and you know how in dreams sometimes you can see things and it's like you have a TV screen on in your mind? That's what happened. A TV screen went on in my mind. I'm lying there resting. I'm not wide awake. I'm not meditating. I'm not dreaming, and I'm not sleeping. I'm in that in-between state, okay? And the TV screen goes on, and then I didn't see myself, but I walked into a room of stone, and I see these stone 2 foot by 3 foot stone blocks, floor, stone walls, stone ceiling. And I scuba dive, so I can tell vertical height pretty easily. And I looked up in this experience, I look up, and it was about 40 to 50 feet high ceilings, big, huge room. I go in, there's nobody in the room. I'm alone in the room. All the furniture is pushed to the walls, except there's one piece of furniture in the middle of the room that I walk towards. It's a full-length mirror. I go up to this full-length mirror. It's the only time I've ever seen myself visually, face and everything, in a dream or any vision, meditation. No, it's the only time I've ever seen myself like that, outside of, you know, planet Earth, 21st century, seeing myself. And I saw myself in the mirror. I was a huge guy. I didn't know how big I was at the time, but I was big. And I had long reddish hair, a reddish beard, and I had full-length chainmail on, and a white tunic with a cross. I was a crusader. And when I had this experience, immediately I had knowingness. I had no real thought about it other than knowingness. I just knew it was me. You know, like, how do you know that you're on a Zoom call right now, listening to this guy, Kelvin Chin, talk about afterlife and reincarnation experiences? You just know. You don't have to go ask your neighbor to come over to your house and say, hey, what am I doing right now? Give me some corroboration that I am actually sitting in front of my computer watching this guy talk about afterlife and reincarnation stuff. No, you just know you are. That level of knowingness is what I had. I just knew that was me. And then a millisecond later, doubt went through me. I didn't even have a thought. It was just doubt, but I knew it was doubt that I was doubting whether that was me. And then a millisecond later, this energy shot through my body and went through my feet, through my body, up through my head, and shot out the top of my head. It was like if you ever stick a fork in a toaster to pull the toast out that's stuck and you get shocked. It was like that times 1,000, that times 10,000. It was just energy was shot through me with knowingness again. So there was no thought there. It was knowingness, doubt, knowingness. that was me. And then I just relaxed. And then the floodgates opened up for months and months, and then years and then decades about that memory. That's one of the lifetimes as a crusader that I have a lot of memories from. But they came in various pieces. And I was in the Third Crusades, so forth. And later, here's another piece I'll tell you, just to give you as a teaching example of how they can come in pieces. About a year, 6 months later, I had more memories, and I was in battle, and I could taste the rocks in my teeth because the dust. Because I was in the Crusades, Third Crusades. You're fighting in the desert essentially, on horseback, etc. And then fast forward another 20 years or something like that. I in my meditation, I said the word Saracens, and I didn't know what Saracens was, so I had to go look it up. I didn't know it was a verb, a noun, an adjective, what? And then I realized that I looked it up and I found out that Saracens is the term for Muslims before 1300 AD. We use the word in English, Muslims, for people who are followers of Muhammad and Islam and so forth, after about 1300 AD. Before 1300 AD, the term was Saracens. I was in the Third Crusades in the 1100s. I did not know that as Kelvin Chin. So these are like little data points that kind of reinforce that, well, maybe that was a real memory that I had. Another example of what happened more recently, about 5-6 years ago, I had the knowingness that I was 6'5", 225, 230 pounds when I was a crusader. Because back in 1978, when I had this experience, I saw myself, I knew I was huge, but I didn't know how big. 5, 6, 8 years ago, I had this knowingness that I was 6'5", 225, 230 pounds. That's how big I was. So there weren't too many people that big in the Third Crusade. So then I went back and connected the dots. This is the follow the breadcrumbs example that I gave you as a teaching point. Follow these data points that you get, and then you can kind of connect the dots a little bit like that. The other point I want to end with here is the jigsaw puzzle point. The jigsaw puzzle is the analogy that I use when I talk about reincarnation memories, how they can come up in pieces like this. You know how you have a jigsaw puzzle and you get it in a box and you have the cover of the box and you can see what you're going to make with the 1,000 pieces in your jigsaw puzzle or whatever, 500 pieces, whatever it is. Well, this is like reincarnation memories come in the form of jigsaw puzzle, but without the box cover, so you don't know what it's supposed to look like. So I may get pieces of this lifetime and then another piece of this lifetime, and then I get 3 pieces of this lifetime, and I get 10 pieces of that lifetime, and I get 20 pieces of this lifetime. So maybe in the Crusader memory lifetime, maybe I have 3 pieces that go together, 10 pieces that go together over here, but they don't go with the 3 pieces. I have another 25 pieces of the jigsaw puzzle that go together over here, but they don't go together with the other 3 or 10 pieces of that Crusader lifetime. They're all separate, but they're pieces of that one lifetime. And that's how it tends to come, I find. And actually, if you think about it, it's no different than this lifetime of yours right now. Forget about past lives. Forget about reincarnation. You just think about your lifetime, this lifetime. You go back, how much do you remember? You don't remember everything. God forbid remember everything. I don't remember how many stairs I counted when I walked up the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. when I was 9 years old or something. I don't need to remember that. That's a waste of my mind, right? So we remember pieces of stuff, even in this lifetime. And what do we tend to remember more of? The emotional memories that really touched us emotionally, either angered us, made us very sad, made us very happy, or upset us in a very deep way. Emotional memories is what we tend to remember. So you don't need to remember your reincarnation memories, your past life memories, in order to fully develop as a human being. I teach that what we can look at is our emotional patterns. And if we look at our emotional patterns, then we can learn a lot about who we are. Because what is life all about all the time? To me, life is about learning more about who we are. That's what self-development, that's what self-realization means. That's what any spiritual pursuit in life really means. It distills down to that one thing, knowing more about who I am. And my experience is that that's what these past life memories can provide us with, insights into more about who I have been. So I've been a Buddhist monk, I've been a Native American, I've lived in the Middle East 2,000 years ago, I've been Caucasian, as you've heard. Basically, I've been all ethnicities. And I think that may be true for many of us. And I think if we had more of these kind of memories, more relaxed, less fear, that more of these memories would come up in people, I think it would contribute greatly to our acceptance of other people in the world, knowing that, in fact, we have been like them. We have lived in other cultures. I've lived as a Muslim before in another lifetime. I've been Christian, I've been Native American, I've been Buddhist, I've been many, many religions and cultures in all of Kelvin Chin's lifetimes that I am, and these are just the ones that I'm aware of. I've probably had thousands of lifetimes, but these are the 23, 25 that I'm aware of. So I suggest that we look at the afterlife experience and reincarnation and so forth as an opportunity to learn more about the universe, the structure of how the universe operates, and also to learn more about ourselves, most importantly. Because whether you believe in any of this stuff, it does not matter. We all are living now in the 21st century, in 2020, in our continual present. And what I teach, all the work I do, is to reinforce the idea that we're living in the moment. We live in the present with our loved ones and who we're with and who we want to be with for the rest of our lives. And that's what we need to focus our attention on, the continual present, which is where we are now. Okay? Thank you. Any questions?
So thank you so much, sir. Actually, it was really an uplifting lecture for everyone, moreover, and giving us the tips to, just overcoming all the fears of life and death, and how to bring mindfulness, calmness. We have been quite thankful to you, and your session was quite interesting, and people are actually like glued to it. So it was
Good.
an amazing lecture, actually. It was an
Good.
amazing session, and sharing your experiences and hearing about them, that they were actually quite interesting. So thank you so much, sir.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Glad to hear that. Good to hear that.
Yes, sir. So shall we move on to the questionnaire?
Sure.
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to ask, I have been reading about the posts, some of the posts and articles related to the life after death. So once I've heard that whenever the soul leaves our body, so scientists have revealed that there is a loss in weight in some grams. So do you suggest that soul has some weight?
I don't know if the soul has weight. I've heard that story. I've heard that factoid as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's accurate or not, but even if it is accurate, again, perhaps, I don't know. I cannot answer that. So, but all I know is that our soul, our spirit, our consciousness does continue, and it is an energy form. So does it have some weight to it? I don't know. You'd have to ask the scientists about that.
Most probably, actually. So it was actually a fact. Even I was just going through some articles and I read that it's about some grams or something. Okay. So next I would request you to share some tips to bring mindfulness to the people in their life.
Yeah. I think the issue, when you say mindfulness and meditation and that kind of thing, yeah? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So my suggestion, so the meditation that I teach, as I briefly said in the talk, is a very easy technique, effortless. No focus, no controlling the mind, no clearing the mind of thoughts. So the mind, it can think whatever it wants to think in the way that I teach the meditation. So my suggestion is that people look for that type of meditation wherever they are. And if they want to contact me, certainly I'd be happy to teach them. But whatever meditation they seek out, I think it should be an easy, as effortless as possible. And the reason is because the easier and the more effortless the technique is, first of all, you'll do it. If it's too difficult, you'll just say, "I'll forget about it." I teach so many people who just say, "I can't do it," because it's too hard, so you won't do it. But number two, it's more effective when it's easy and effortless, because if you think about it, and as you can see, I think about things very logically and rationally. So I thought about this a lot, and I thought, if we want to turn on this automatic switch that's called the parasympathetic nervous system in our human body, which is, for those people who don't know what that is, that's the opposite of the fight or flight switch. So it's called the parasympathetic. If you want to turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, which is an automatic switch, what's the fastest way to turn on? What's the best way to turn it on? The most effective way to turn it on? The most effective way to turn on an automatic switch is as automatic as possible. You don't turn on an automatic switch logically, right? Rationally, think about it, by trying to control to turn on an automatic switch. The harder you control, the more you focus, the more you try to clear your mind, the harder it is going to turn on an automatic switch. So the technique needs to be as easy and effortless as possible, logically, right? In order to be the most effective technique to turn on the automatic switch the fastest. So that's my suggestion to people. So that's why I teach it the way I do, to try to remove as much effort as possible. So when you hear the phrase, and in India, it's very common, because I looked this up. I wrote an essay on the mind is like a monkey. And so I wrote an essay about this, and I looked it up, and there's 50 million monkeys in the country of India. So it makes sense why, you know this, right? It makes sense why the phrase from Indian meditation gurus has come up that the mind is like a monkey. And I say, no, okay, the mind is like a monkey, but don't fight the monkey. That's the thing. If you fight the monkey will fight you back. So don't fight the monkey is my meditation tip, and that's how I teach the meditation, right?
That's really nice, actually. Okay, so the most important question I would like to ask is, what exactly the idea behind your moving towards and discussing about death and fear of overcoming death? So what was an idea behind that to bring this type of concept to people and, bringing it and spreading it all together?
Well, yeah, what got me started in this whole area really was, even though I had the reincarnation memory in 1977, in 1982, my mom died. So my mom died when she was young. She was only in her 50s, and I was obviously much younger. Thank you. And it really shook me. I was very close to my mom, as you could tell from this story, when she used to take me to the museum when I was 5, 6 years old and say, "Okay, see you back here, Kelvin, at 11 o'clock. And I was very close to my mom my whole life, and I get a little emotional sometimes talking about it. And so I started helping people only because it helped me. When I started talking to people, like if I saw you in school back then, you would say, "Oh, how you doing, Kelvin?" I say, "Well, I'm doing okay, but my mom died." And then you would still tell me, say, "Oh, but your mom died. Oh my God, I'm so sorry to hear that. My grandfather died and I was so close to him," or whatever. And people would start opening up and talking to me more. And that helped me. And so then I started talking to people and I started figuring out what worked, just because what made me feel better, what made them feel better, and so forth. So that was 38 years ago. I started doing this, you know? That's how I got into it, really.
Okay, that's actually quite touchy, I would say.
Mm.
Okay, so yeah, one more question is, since we have been, since being an Indian, I would like to ask that what we have been studying and hearing about the things in religions books that is being written. So people say that on the basis of our positive deeds as well as the negative deeds, it has been decided that in the next cycle, what you will be and what sort of traits you will be getting, all based on positive or negative deeds you did in your last birth cycle. So is that true? Is that fact true?
That's not my experience. That's not my experience. And I have spoken, and I have, and I have spoken with, and I'm still in touch with some of the early Vedic spiritual leaders. You know who Shankara is?
Yes.
Shankara.
Yes.
So Shankara was Vyasa in a previous life. Not everybody knows this about Shankara. Shankara was Vyasa in a previous life. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And in the Mahabharata, many people know that, I mean, they may not know the Mahabharata, but they know the Bhagavad Gita, right?
Yes.
The Bhagavad Gita is in the Mahabharata. So those are stories that Vyasa wrote. Vyasa in a previous lifetime, he was later Shankara.
Mm.
And Vyasa wrote those stories as instructional. They were meant to be instructional. And there are some good tips and instructions in there. The idea that you're touching on is karma, right? The
Yes.
idea of karma,
Yes. Yes.
and good karma and bad karma, and this idea
Yes.
that there's the idea that in layperson's language, those people who don't know what karma just means consequences to one's actions.
Mm.
And so there's this idea of good karma and bad karma, good consequences, bad karmas, doing good deeds and bad deeds and so forth.
Yes.
But to use layperson's language, I sometimes talk about this as an accounting system. It's like in business. So in business, we have an accounting system. It's like debits and credits, right, in accounting. So
Yes.
it's kind of like this, people think about this as a cosmic accounting system. And my experience is that there is no cosmic accounting system, and there's nobody on the other side keeping track of this good and bad deeds thing that karma, that the early Vedic leaders, Vedic spiritual leaders, came up with. And my understanding, and this is kind of something I get into what we're talking about now in great detail in a 2-hour talk. I talk about this in one of my 6-part classes that I teach. But I'll give you the short version. The short version is that somewhere between 6 to 10,000, 7 to 10,000 years ago, these early Vedic leaders came up with this idea of karma in order to try to curb bad behavior and try to encourage good behavior and try to curb bad behavior. But it was a theory it was a theory. It wasn't a description of the structure of the afterlife. So later, over the many thousands of years, other people have taken that and they've made it into this structural thing, as if there is some structural accounting system, and there is not. My experience is that there is nothing like that. So it's a theoretical thing that kind of developed into almost a religious thing, right? That people have taken on in various parts of the world, not just in India. And my experience is that it's choice. We have choice to come back or not to come back, and how we come back, when we come back, who we come back as. I've been a woman in other lifetimes as well. Nice. So you can choose your gender, you can choose who you want to come back and what family you want to be in. You can make those choices, but that's a choice that you can make or not make. Also, some people just choose to they random, like, I'll go to any family. Other people are more strategic and they say, no, I want to go to that family because that father and that mother I had a previous relationship with, and I want to have another relationship with them or whatever. So you can be strategic, but it's free will is what we have. We have the free will, meaning personal choice, to make those decisions.
Okay. So if people have these rights of choosing their families or something like that, so why would people choose to go in a poor family or in a family where they are having even not even a basic life to live? So why would people choose that? Even why would people choose to be an animal?
Yes, I have memories being an animal as well. So, so why would people choose that? That's a good question. That you'd have to ask that person that question, first of all, number one. Number two, they may not have made that choice. Like I said, some people are not strategic about how they think about things and they're making choice. Just think about right now, forget about in the afterlife. Just think about right now of all the people you know, friends, relatives, people you've worked with, people you've ever met in your life, teachers in your life, everybody who you've had in your life, you've contact with. How many of them are really planners and strategic thinkers about how they do things in their life, in their relationship, in their job, in their selection of the job, in the selection of where they went to school, college, whatever, their selection of their major, all of that stuff. How strategic are people? Some people are, and some people aren't. I would say most people are not that strategic on an ongoing basis.
Active.
Right?
Yes.
So I think that can happen randomly sometimes, to answer your question. And here's another nuance to your answer. And I think that some people could choose. For example, I'll talk about myself, for example, okay? I chose to come back into this family of my mother and my father, my biological mother and my father, this lifetime as Kelvin Chin, okay? I was definitely much closer to my mother than my father.
Yes.
If I'm going to want to choose to be with my mother, it's a package deal. I got to go along with, if I want to go into that family, she's already chosen to be with this guy. It happens to be my father. Now, do I have other experiences with my father that were good and so forth? So yes, but I was much closer to my mother than my father. If you heard, I briefly talk about this kind of in my book, but my father and I did not get along when I was growing up, all right? So you talk about situations where, where the relationship may not be so great. I did not have a great relationship with my father growing up, and he was not a very emotionally sensitive person at all. And he was very kind of cold. And they're all business. My dad was all business. You know that phrase? All business. Yeah. And so and we used to yell at each other a lot when I was a teenager. Forget about it. When I became bigger than he was, I'm 6'3" and 6'2", So my father was 5'6", and so thing is, why did I choose that? I think I chose because of my mother, not as much my father, right? Now, I love my father. I love my father. He knows I love him. They're both dead on the other side. We've communicated many times. He knows I love him. But to be honest and candid with you, I'm sure I picked my going to this family because of my mother more than my father.
Right. Yes, definitely.
Right?
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay. So next question we have, what is the exact reason of deja vu?
Say again?
What is the exact reason of deja vu?
The reason of the what?
Deja vu.
What's
you
that?
talked about it. You talked about it in the session.
Oh, what did I say?
Deja vu. The experiences we have.
Deja vu.
Yeah,
Deja vu.
yeah.
Yes. Yes. Deja vu.
What are the exact reasons for that? Because I also experience many a times that I have a thought sometime, and many a times it happens that yes, I'm in the same condition and I feel that yes, I might have thought of that thing once, or I have been in that situation earlier also. So
Yeah.
what is the exact reason behind that?
I think there could be a number of reasons for deja vu. First of all, they're not always recognition memories like I was talking about, but it's kind of more intense deja vus can be. But I think we can have kind of less intense deja vus that many people have. That I think I just did that. I think I just didn't. We just. I feel like I just that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
That kind of experience. I think that actually could just be one of two things that I'm thinking of. One, it could just be our brain forgetting. So it could be our memory just forgetting, and then we just, whatever. But it also could be separate from that. Another possibility could be that, how I talk about the 8-inch plastic bucket part of our mind. So that focusing part of our mind, but that there's this expansion, vastness of the human mind that also exists. I think we can also have deja vu experiences that are kind of like our focusing part of our mind is thinking something, and the vast part of our mind picks up on it almost before our conscious mind picks up on it, but it's there in our mind. So it's not something outside. It's still our mind experiencing, but we're experiencing it before we're consciously aware of it on some subtle level. Definitely. So it's not just it hasn't risen fully to being conscious. So how sometimes you have a feeling about something. I have a feeling about something, and then it later manifests, and you go, oh, that. It's kind of like that experience. So I'm not describing a disjunctive time experience. I'm describing a more expansive mental experience, if that makes sense. I think that could also be, but it also could just be forgetting too. I mean, that can happen too,
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, so you mentioned that you have been enjoying different types of religions all over the world. So, how was your experience enjoying those? And like you chose some which you liked or something like that. So, can you share your experiences with us?
So, do you mean my teaching now with different people from different religions? You mean my personal experience in reincarnation memories?
So you shared actually that you have enjoyed different religions in your life.
Oh, I have.
Yeah.
Well, so I was talking about in different lifetimes. I have.
Okay.
Not in this lifetime so much. Well, in this lifetime, I'll just tell you my religion. In this lifetime, I grew up Christian. So I grew up Christian, but I did not pay attention in Sunday school. So I would go to Sunday school, and all the adults would go to church, where I went, Congregational Church in Norwood, Massachusetts, the first Congregational Church, Protestant. And so the adults would go to the church, the sermon with the minister, and then all the kids, we would go to a big house across the driveway. It was like how you have these you ever go to these like big feasts and festivals or a big family gathering, and it's like all the adults eat in one table, and all the kids they got to go in and eat at the kids' table. It was kind of like that when I went to church. We were just like, okay, all the kids go to that building across the driveway, and so I go to Sunday school, but I would not pay attention. I just would pay attention there. So I was kind of grew up Christian, but not really paying attention to the Bible or anything. So that was my spiritual upbringing this lifetime, until I started having my own spiritual experiences, of course. But no, I was talking about in other lifetimes. I've been a Buddhist, I've been Muslim, I've been Christian, I've been Native American, I've been all those different ethnicities with different cultures and different religions. at different times. I've been a Tibetan Buddhist, I've been a Chinese Buddhist, I've been Japanese,
Nice.
in another lifetime. So many different ethnicities as well, African, etc. Yeah.
So, okay. So with this, I think I have a question, a funny one. Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you ever use the Ouija board?
Oh, the Ouija board.
Yes.
Did I ever use a Ouija board? Probably when I was a kid, probably once or twice, or I went over to somebody's house and they went up in their attic in their house or something, and somebody had an old Ouija board hanging around. I think maybe once or something, once or twice. I don't know. I can't remember. Not very often though. It was not a memorable experience if I did.
So, I mean, you're familiar with the like connecting to spirits?
No, my family very much not. My mother was a chemistry
No, no,
major.
actually, no, sorry, sir, to interrupt. But my question was, are you familiar in
Oh,
bringing or connecting to spirits?
oh, am I familiar?
Yes.
Yes. So that started happening in the mid 1980s, where I just started getting information from the other side just spontaneously. I was not looking for it. I wasn't studying it or anything. It just happened in a quiet moment when I was alone, and angels, archangels, for about a year and a half, 2 years, something like that, maybe a year and a half, and then other dead loved one, people who are dead, people who had never been in physical form, and so forth, communicating with me. So that continues to today, and now I've communicate, but it's just like I talk with you. It's like that. It's very normal for me, and it doesn't happen all the time. It's not all the time. It's not every day, and so forth. It's just every once in a while. But it's the doorway, you could say, the doorway between the other side and this side is very familiar to me, and it's not far away. It's right here. We just can't see it. It's just vibrating at a different frequency, you could say, and the other side is really right here. Yeah.
That's really amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more thing, I
Yeah.
might say it would be the last question.
Okay.
So usually what we dreams are basically the experiences which we are having in our day-to-day lives or something. So can you just give us some sort of tips to, deviate ourselves from the materialistic world to the spiritual or the way towards the God in dreams?
In
Can we do
dreams.
that? Can we do that? Or do we have any control over those?
Yes. So dreams are interesting because basically, I think dreams come down to two categories of types of dreams, in my opinion. One are kind of fantasy dreams, and the other are more realistic. We could call them creative dreams or insightful dreams. Okay. So there's basically two categories. So the fantasy dreams are more releasing of stress and emotional stress that we are getting rid of. And it could be from the past, it could be from yesterday, it could be from 5 years ago, 20 years ago, it could be from another lifetime. We don't know. Okay. So I think that we have the fantasy dreams. Those are dreams that kind of don't make sense. They kind of don't really make sense. Just weird stuff is happening and strange things. And you could also have a combination. So the second kind of dream is things make sense, and it's real life in the dream, and it's as if you have another life in those dreams, and those are more insightful and creative things going on. That is more like what you're saying, where you can kind of connect with the other side, what you're calling the other world, the other side, through your dreams. It's possible. There would be more kind of those kind of dreams, and those kind of dreams can also connect you with your past, your reincarnation memories as well. You can open up your memories to yourself in your dreams. That's actually how my very first reincarnation memory happened. that's why I didn't know it was a reincarnation memory. I thought it was just a dream that I had, you know, but it was a very, very clear, it was that second category of dream where it was very, very clear, and I was there and I could see myself in my sandals, and I was really upset, and I was in a, you know, a trench like on the side of the road, you know, and it was very, very long ago. But I did, that's all I knew in the dream. But that's a second kind of dream, okay? Then you can have combinations of the two. And in my book, I talk about my friend Josephine in the sections called Josephine and Lucius. So when you get my book and you read about Josephine and Lucius in the book, that's the section title, Josephine and Lucius. And in there, she talks about Josephine has a combo dream, you know, like little fantasy, little weird stuff happening, but it opened up her memories also. So in that one, she was drowning in her dream, for example. She was in a ancient temple, and she was drowning in it in the basement, and she was helping people get up the stairs to leave the temple. And then she went out into the hallway, and she thought she woke up in her dream. She thought she woke up in her dream. Later, she realized she was still sleeping in 21st century. In 2020, she was still sleeping. But she thought she was woken up in her dream. And she saw this guy in the hallway, and he had really curly blonde hair and really, really incredibly bright blonde, sparkly blonde hair, and a face, a really handsome guy, and so forth. Anyway, that actually opened up her memory to a past life that she had with that guy in the dream, who she ended up looking up in Wikipedia, and she plugged in a couple of words in Wikipedia and his picture popped up, which was really like bizarre to her, right? She just plugged like a few words in. You can read the story in the book, but she plugged in a few words and she went, and his picture popped up, and then she looked up who he was and so forth, and it opened up a past life memory to her. Now that's a combination thing, because it was like a fantasy thing, being in the dream, you know, in the temple, waking up in a drowning, and then thinking that she was awake in the dream. She wasn't awake. She was, you know, whatever. It was, so she had a combo of the two. So dreams can be a way, though, to answer your question, can be a way to open us up to the other side, because we're more relaxed then, you know?
Yes. So, oh, thank you. I mean, it was actually a motivational lecture for everyone, moreover, and quite interesting to hear those facts. Even you have just unrevealed all those facts people were not aware of even.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, sir, for this beautiful oration. And it has been, you know, I hope that the session has stirred up all the thoughts, those, you know, those thoughts which people actually not aware of. So I think it would have helped people to overcome the fear of death, and even to bring some sort of positivity in their lives.
Yeah, and they can contact me, and I do free phone session with people to help talk with them specifically, personally, privately, about their fears about death and dying, to help them overcome them. And so I do a free phone session worldwide, and I use my video conference account for people around the world, so they don't have to pay for the phone call and so forth, or people in the US just call me. Should I share my contact information?
Yes, sir. Surely, sir. That would be quite helpful for everyone.
Okay. So let's see. Share. Okay. Here we go. There we go. So people can contact me on my website, kelvinchin.org, or they can text me if they're close enough to text me, if they want to text me. The YouTube channel, I have a YouTube channel, Kelvin Chin, it's called Kelvin Chin Turning Within. My YouTube channel, or they should connect with me on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or on LinkedIn, any of those. They should feel free to connect with me. And I enjoy helping people worldwide. So there you go. I have a number of clients actually in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, many countries in Asia, Malaysia, Singapore, Australia, New Zealand, many countries in Asia, Vietnam, Korea, etc.
This is quite interesting, sir. So I hope that many of the people have been quite enlightened with the session. And I hope that, yeah, after this session, people will be contacting you for their fears, for in bringing motivation to their lives.
Great. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much, sir, for this session. And with this, I would like to address all the participants to kindly visit the description box for the speaker schedule, for the certificates of participation, etc. So with this, we'll move on to the commencement of the session. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.